What's up, guys? It's me, JellyKnees, and let's talk some amulets. So we're going to start doing a series where we go through all of the items that have been released in Ethereal or revealed in Ethereal so far, the passives, what they do, some of the stats. We're not going to really go over costs because the costs are not finalized by any means, and even the stats are subject to change a little bit. So here and there, you're going to see some weird stuff. But so let's get started with the amulets. Get subscribed to make sure you see everything, and let's see what we got. So we see here the tier tree of the amulets. So we start down here. We've got one tier one, and it splits into 4 paths. And we've got the 4 tier 2s, and then they all lead into a tier 3. So the thing that Ethereal is going to do is that for each item type or set, depending on how you want to talk about it, they're going to have stats that are tied to that set. They can have some outside stats, but the core stats are going to be 1 or 2 stats for that item. So for the amulets in particular, we've got magic damage and health are the 2 stats that are important. So all amulets will have some kind of magic and health, excluding the tier 1. So let's go from left to right here, and we'll look at the first tier 3, which is Talisman of Life. So Talisman of Life here is a very interesting item that I think is going to be taken a lot by a lot of people. It starts out with the empty locket. So in this case, we've got 10 magic power and 100 health. Something very basic, gives a little bit of strength, a little bit of health, but nothing too much after that. The Locket of Whispers, being the tier 2 of this tree or this path, adds mana to that equation. So you're getting extra mana. And then once you get to Talisman of Life, you have 40 magical power, 250 health, 200 mana, all very good solid stats for someone to take. But the big thing is the passive. The passive for Talisman of Life is called Omnivamp. Your magical damage now heals you for 30% of the damage after mitigation. AoE spells only heal for 5%. So that by itself is going to be a very strong passive that a lot of people are going to want. This is one of the few items in Ethereal that's going to give spellcasters some kind of regen for their health. And I think that that's an incredible way to do it. So we're going to see this item everywhere, I think, especially early on. But the main people that I fully expect to use this are going to be magic users, casters in particular. So you could see the Void Lane archmages. I could definitely see taking this as probably a 3rd or 4th item. It probably won't have too much of an investment tied to the stats, but for the passive, it's going to have a little bit more. So it's going to be that mid to late game transition item to give you just a little bit of edge in team fights, let you sustain a little bit longer, get through those fights. And I think is going to be very, very impactful for very high bursty damage dealers, single target burst damage dealers. The other people that I could see taking this would be AP junglers. So if you're an offensive AP jungler, like we think Leah's going to be, I could definitely see Leah taking something like this. She's probably going to have AoE abilities being a Sky Slayer jungler, which means that she's going to heal for the AoE, getting 5% of that damage back as health after mitigation. So I think that there's definitely going to be something interesting to see here. We'll have to wait and see if there's a limit to how much you can heal off of jungle minions. Being that there are 38 camps, there is the potential that AP junglers could take this item, go to clear their jungle, and end up with a significant amount of health coming out of the jungle into a next gank if they went in with a quarter health, let's say. So it's going to be interesting to see how that all works, and it's going to depend on ratios as well. But overall, I think one of the best, if not the best, amulet that we have right now. The next one's going to be Dragon's Heart Jewel. This one's going to be a little more of a niche item, though I do think a lot of people could take this pretty much whenever they wanted. Not whenever they wanted, but AP people or magic users are going to be very susceptible to taking this item. So just like before, the tier 1 is Empty Locket. They all start with the same thing. Stats are exactly the same. The tier 2 is Ruby Necklace. So we've got the magic power, we've got the health, and then this adds health per 5. So health per 5 is going to be a very nice stat to have, particularly for junglers in the early game. I think this is going to be a very useful item for them if you're going kind of like an AP tank, AP bruiser kind of build. And then we have the Dragon's Heart Jewel, which so gives 30 magical power, 300 health, and then 25 health per 5. The biggest thing about Dragon's Heart Jewel is the passive. So Dragon's Heart. When entering combat, you're enchanted with Dragon Fire. You release a cone of fire in front of you that deals some damage plus some magical power, magic damage every half second for 5 seconds. So there's 10 total instances of damage. So the big thing is that this is going to deal a decent amount of damage if you have the magical power to back it up. So the more magical power you have, the more damage this deals. 5% of your magical power can be quite a lot with what we've seen, especially when you multiply it 10 times. But I do think that the cone is going to be fairly short probably in terms of how far out it goes from you. So you're going to need to get into that closer distance. So I'm thinking a melee AP bruiser, AP tank, for the most part, is going to use this. Now, on the flip side, this item does have some counterplay to it because it says when entering combat, you gain this passive. And because it has a 20-second cooldown outside of combat, and it's activated once you just enter combat, for instance, if I'm Dante on the enemy team and I know you have this item, I can shoot you, proc this, and then just wait for the 10 waves to go out. And now I know that there's a 20-second interval that I have open to attack you with full force. So definitely something that is going to have to be played around with, and maybe even balance changes around that. There's some kind of activatable, or it's only when you initiate combat or something, but maybe they want the counterplay to it. I'm all for counterplay. That's my number one thing that I like in MOBAs, is seeing that I can counter somebody just by playing smart, which is how it should be in a lot of cases. So I think this is going to be a very cool item, and I can't wait to see how all the interactions start manifesting with it. The third item we have is Perseus' Warding. So Empty Locket, tier 1. We have Blessed Amulet as the tier 2 item. And Blessed Amulet actually gives magic resist in addition to the health and magic power. So like I said, this is kind of reiterating that there's the two main stats, magic power and health, and then they can throw in a third one depending on what they feel the item needed. And then it evolves into tier 3, which is Perseus' Warding at 45 magic power, 200 health, and 30 magic resist. The interesting thing here is I don't think this is going to be built on tanks super often. I think that this item is more likely to be built with some kind of AP casters looking for defensive options, and the passive is why. So it's Spell Reflects. Getting hit by an enemy myth's spell reflects it back in its original direction, dealing 50% of its original damage to enemy myths. That's kind of nuts. I don't think tanks are going to use this too often. It's got a 100-second cooldown, so about a minute and a half, a little more than that. And I feel like the tanks have more item options than to build this item in particular. But casters, it sounds like it's going to mitigate the damage you would take from this ability and fire it back. The interesting thing that I want to see is when it says it reflects it back in its original direction, is that how is it going to work with single target versus skill shots versus AoEs? All of those things could add another level of complication into how the spell reflects and does damage. It'll also be very interesting to see how quickly that happens. So is it going to be an instantaneous that the second they cast it and it gets within a certain range, or is it going to be slightly delayed? Do I have to cast it? What are the qualifications in order to get this to happen? Like I said, I really think this is probably going to be a defensive option for the magic power users in Ethereal, more so than it would be on tanks. It's something that they have magic power, a lot of magic power on their team. You want a little bit of health, get a little bit of power for it, but the passive is really where it shines. And the last amulet item that I want to talk about is Amulet of the Ancients. Now, this item, I think, is in one of two camps. It's either going to be very, very strong or practically useless. And I'll kind of explain why in just a second. Empty Locket, the first one. Then we have Wally's Lost Necklace, which is magic power, health, and persistence. Persistence, if you guys didn't know, is the crowd control reduction stat in Ethereal. So 10% persistence means you're going to get out of that crowd control 10% faster than you would normally. Then when you upgrade it into the tier 3 Amulet of the Ancients, you have 25 magic power, 400 health, and 20% persistence. Very good stats, I think, all around. AP tanks and maybe bruisers are going to build this, I think, a lot if the passive is as good as it sounds. So the passive is Ancient Salvation. Upon dropping below 30% total health, release Ancient Roots in a 150 unit area around you. This deals damage to all the enemy myths that are rooted, and they're rooted for 1 second in place. For each enemy rooted, you also heal 2.5% of your maximum health, including minions. You get 0.5% on minions instead of 2.5%, but minions do count toward that health increase, which I think is the big thing that separates this item from being mediocre to just okay to potentially very, very strong. It's on a 2-minute cooldown, which is not terribly long when you consider the effects of this. But if you're going in here and you get you hit that 30% threshold and you're standing on top of all 6 enemy myths, you're going to get an insane amount. You get 15% of your maximum health back. And that doesn't even include any minions that you hit with that. If they're pushing on a large minion wave and you manage to get all 6 myths and 15 minions, you're going to heal a significant chunk of your health, as well as doing damage to them, to all of them on top of that, basically for free. Yes, you had to take damage to get to that threshold, but if you combine this with other items that when your health gets lower, you become stronger, you could kind of go for this almost min-max build of low health equals strength and just absolute domination. And so I think this item has the potential to be very, very strong in Ethereal, and we'll kind of have to wait and see where that comes out. Like I said, I think it's mostly going to apply to AP tanks and maybe bruisers, depending on how things are going. I think if a bruiser is ahead, they're not going to take this item ever because they should just be dominating already. But maybe if they're going even or slightly behind, we might see an Amulet of the Ancients on a bruiser type build or character. I love the amulets. I think that their design is really, really good. Some of the stat changes are a little iffy here and there, but like I said, they're all subject to change. So I'm not too worried about that. And I know balance tweaks are going to be a very big thing as the game gets started. So, but guys, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on all of the amulets, the passives, the designs, the stats, all of it. I want to hear it all down in the comments below. Make sure you also get subscribed and turn the bell on so you don't miss any of the other future item content. But click right over here. We'll have an Ethereal playlist of all the content that I've made for the game. And on the other side, a video recommended just for you by YouTube. Click the little icon above my head, get subscribed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.